In this video, we're going to get started on installing the components onto the front subframe. To get started, I just wanted to point out a few of the differences between a subframe for a Moke compared to a subframe for a Mini. One of the most obvious features are on this particular subframe are these brackets here to mount the front bull bar or bumper bar onto the subframe. There are also these lower bolts here and another set here, depending on the type of bull bar or bumper bar that goes on. So the one that I'll have for this Moke does actually attach to these two brackets, and it's the one that comes straight out of the front grille. The other difference as well are these captive nuts. I don't know whether they're actually factory or the previous owner has just prepared and welded them on there, but that is actually for a sump guard that protects the gearbox. So that's what that is for. I mean, that could be put onto any subframe, including a Mini, if you needed it to. Okay, so just like on the Mini subframe, the first thing we need to install is this bump stop. So there's two holes underneath the tower there, and then we'll use some washers and nuts to hold them on. Of course, this can't be done after the rubber donut suspension has been put in, so this is pretty much the first thing you need to do. Alright, so what we're going to do now is just get the upper suspension arm and parts put in there. So first of all, we need to get the donut in there. Can take a bit of manoeuvring to get in there. Once it's in there, you should be able to rotate it to get it into the right position. So that's how it's set up there. Of course, it's not going to stay on its own. Now, I'm using adjustable high-lows on this Mini, so I don't have the original trumpets. Well, I do have them, but I'm not going to use them. The advantage of using these is that you don't need to use a spring compressor to get that rubber donut compressed in order to get the upper control arm in. So the first thing I need to do is just get the upper control arm. What I've done, obviously I've taken out the pin. I've just moved this rubber seal just across a bit more. This is the side that has the thicker washer that obviously points towards the front of the car. I've left that washer in place with the rubber seal on there just to hold it. That'll give me enough room to get it in there. And then of course the larger washer just sort of sits in that hole there, so that's not an issue. And I'll just put a bit of grease around this part here just so it slides into where it needs to sit nice and easily. These have all been reconditioned, and you'll notice that there's a hole at the bottom there. That hole will allow any grease or air to get out when this gets inserted. Just once the angle is right, it should just insert straight in there. There we go, it's nearly there. Yep, that's it. Okay. Alright, so now let's need to get this manoeuvre done correctly. So high-low just sort of needs to sit and hold that rubber cone into position, and then while that's happening, slide that in. Actually, you may be better off sitting that on there first. And then push up on the donut. nearly there. Once I get to that position, I can then just get the main pin through here. It's got to go through this direction. And then there's a hole over on this side here where it sticks through. Obviously the indentation goes on the inside. Alright, next I'm going to try and get this piece on first. There is a captive bolt on, a captive nut on that side, but there isn't one on this side. I don't know whether that's something that was just modified or that's how it's meant to be. I can't remember what the mini subframe is like. So that side just a bolt. This side will have a nut. I'll bolt through it with a washer and also a nut. It's not unnecessary to get the bump stop in here now, but I'm just gonna, if I can get it in there, just so it'll need to be fixed up once that suspension can be raised a bit. Right, so next I'll get the spring washer and the nut on each end. These need to be tightened up at the same time, otherwise the pin will just keep on spinning. Okay, so let's fit the lower control. Just make sure you get that the right way. So where the ball joint slides into that hole, it is tapered. So that side is big, the bottom side is smaller. And I've just got the bushes in there already. We'll slide that in place. Okay, and then on the end where the pin sticks out, I'm just putting a washer, a spring washer, and then a nut on the end. And I need to torque that up to 33 foot-pounds or 45 Newton meters. Okay, so the next thing now, I can install the tyre bar. So the way the tyre bar is constructed, that's what the end of it looks like. And then there's one bush that sits on there first. There's a bit of a ridge there that goes into the hole on the subframe. So I just need to take this nut and bolt out of the other end first. Okay, so back on this end, once that bush is on there, it can slide through the frame. And then I'm just going to line up this end down here too. And on this end here, the other rubber bush goes on next. Then you have this curved washer. There's a bit of a curve on it. That goes on there. And then the flat washer goes on next. And then last, a nylock locking nut goes on. I'll just do that by hand, just so I can sort out this end over here. Okay, so the next job that I want to do now is sort out the brake lines for this front subframe. Okay, so I'm using the single line circuit on this particular Moke, and the way that this gets set up, it's the same as on a Mini as well. I've just got all the parts put together, how they will be assembled. So if I'll just start at the top. So that's the brake light pressure switch. So when the pressure builds up, it turns on the rear or the brake lights for the car. Next you have this long bolt here, which pretty much holds all of that together. There's a washer in between. You also have this like Y-shape connector. Of course, there's a copper washer on each side, and then this is what actually gets screwed or bolted onto the subframe. So when you're doing this, I'm going to get this put in just so I can get the actual brake lines done correctly. But of course, that end needs to be screwed into the drum brake or caliper, depending on what you've got on your car. And then once that end is in, you can then bolt that down. But just for the purpose of this, I'm just going to put that on there, but this will need to come off. So I will just hand tighten this down for now, because the purpose of this is just so I can get the actual brake line made up. Okay, then next we would place this whole structure on there. There's a copper washer there. Each side of that there is a copper washer. So then that will wind in. So then this side here, that outlet will go to the left-hand side. The brake line will just continue around the subframe. That comes up from the T connector after the master cylinder. And then of course this brake switch screws into the top. I'll have to double check. I don't think that there's no copper washer, but all of the old ones of these I have, they're not fully wound all the way in. So I'll have to double check whether that thread is kind of tapered to prevent that leaking, because it just seems strange that that just goes in like that, but that's how it is on the Mini and it doesn't leak. So that must be correct. So that'll be the start. I'll just make sure that's tight just so things don't move. And then that way I can sort of work out where the pipes go. Okay, so for the left-hand side, it's a similar process again, where you would need to make sure you've got the brake hose, that end there, screwed into the caliper or drum brake before you tighten up that end. I just want to show you this. I picked up this kit. I can put a link in the description, but anyone in Australia or specifically Sydney will be able to get these at a reasonable price. I think I paid 20 Australian dollars for this whole kit. Normally the mini suppliers sell each of these individual washers for $1 or $2. These are all imperial sized as well. The place I got it from was, they're called Tools Warehouse, but I'll put a link in the description. So there's a few stores around Sydney. They also sell online, so that's pretty good value to pick up one of those. All right, so then on this side again, it will have, that end of the hose will come through. There's a star shaped washer to hold everything nice and tight, and then the thin size bolt. Maybe you could use the thicker one, but because it's not going to matter, but I'll just try this size. So the thinner of the two washers, or the nuts, what need to go on this side, and then the brake pipe connector will just go straight into there. Yeah. All right, so here's the original brake line. It's a bit bent and twisted because it wasn't looked after. I sort of just rebent it sort of how the sort of shape needs to go. So it comes straight down there. Just be mindful of those bolt holes for the bumper, and then the actual pipe will sort of sit under there. There's a little bracket, so it will sort of clip into that. And then there'll be another one I'll have to put on there, over here, and then to that point here. So I think if I just get the length cut first, and then I can work on the fittings. Okay, so I just want to show you this new tool that I purchased. The previous tool I had for making brake lines, it did work, but it's just a bit tedious, and the actual flares weren't 100% fantastic. Where this actual tool creates the flares, it's much quicker, and the actual quality of the flares are a lot better too. All right, so I'll just give you a quick demo on how this tool works. There are cheaper versions available on eBay. This one I actually got through Amazon, and it's actually, let me just see where it's made. It's probably made in China, made in Taiwan, but Titan, it's a US brand, so it is a bit more of a better quality than some of the ones you see on eBay. But anyway, so you take off these two bolts on the top. You don't have to take this all the way out, but I'm just so you can sort of see what it is like inside. So that nut sort of stays in there because that's what the mechanism screws in. So you don't necessarily need to take that straight off, but you need to get the brake line pushed through that hole. So I'll just put that back on for now. I'll just demonstrate on a shorter piece before I do the main one, because the process will be slightly different. Okay, so if that's the bit of brake line we want to use, that slides in. There's a little window here where you can look through to line it up to get it into the correct space. I might just slide one of these the pieces on there, the tube nuts, just so we can sort of see how it sort of fits in, and that'll just slide off the other end anyway. All right, so brake line goes in that hole there. You can line it up so you look through that window, but you can use this bolt to screw in there, and then obviously it makes the brake pipe sit in the right position. So I can screw that in now, push the brake pipe in, and then I need to tighten up both of those bolts. I'll just do it by hand for now, and then use the spanner. Okay. So the brake pipe is sitting against the end of that bolt. So then we just tighten it down. So on a Moke or even a Mini, in Australia they usually just use two standard, so a single ball. A bit of the terminology, because someone put a comment on the previous video about the terminology I use, but I'm just trying to use what I sort of know for Australian brake lines, because in the UK they call things different names. So a single or ball flare is what you would use for fittings like this. So the inside of those fittings here, it's kind of curved where the flare needs to sit against, where some fittings it needs to be what we call like a double flare, which is indented. All right, so let's get started on this. So that's tightened down, and it's a two-step process depending on whether you're making a ball flare or a double flare. So I'll take that out. It comes with this paste, which is kind of like grease. You could just use brake fluid. Some people prefer to use brake fluid. So now this piece here is what does all of the work. So when that screws or bolts into there, it's going to push against the end of the actual brake pipe and then create the actual flare. So wind it in by hand. So there's two operations on here. Operation 1 just creates the bubble or single flare, and then operation 2 will create a double flare. All right, so you just tighten that down until it doesn't go anymore, and then undo it. And what I will do, if you're doing a double flare, you don't have to take the brake pipe in, you just turn that around and then this end will create the double flare. But I will just, for the purpose of this video, undo it just so you can see what that flare looks like. So the fittings, these fittings here will use this, the bubble flare. So that's what it looks like. I'll try and just get it a bit closer. So you notice the top of it is curved. The inside of these fittings is curved, so that will fit nicely in there once that bolts it into position. So that will be the flare to use there. If you're using the female nuts on things like the rear hoses, the joiners in the side pannier, I think, use those too. You need to use a double flare. So all it does, it pretty much just compresses the top of it to create the double flare. So if I just slide that back into position, hopefully that is in the right spot, because you normally wouldn't undo it if you're doing the double flare. You just do it as one operation, turn the piece around, then screw it back in. But yeah, this tool is just so much easier to use than the that previous kit I was using. A lot quicker, and the quality of the flares is much better. Okay, so this time it will go in this way, so I can just put a bit more of that grease on the end just to help it. Okay, then undo it. Okay, and then you'll see there it's indented in the top. There's a bit of bent metal there, we'll just get rid of that. So it creates a nice flare every time. Alright, so let me just slide this fitting off, because I will need to use that for this new brake line that I'm making. So the first thing I want to do is just, I'll cut a length of brake pipe. I just want to get the fitting done on one end, so then I can start bending it and getting it into the right shape. Okay, and now there we have it. There's the final finished product. I've just installed that brake line. So it sort of slots nicely under there where those clips are. It's held in place nicely. It clears all the bolt holes for the bumper, bull bar. Maybe this bit of curve can be fixed up a bit, but everything fits in nicely. Alright, so that's that tool again. I recommend getting one of these. They are so much better than the previous tool. Alright, I'll leave it there, and thanks for watching my videos.